Hey everybody, my name is Jake and this is my channel Wishlist, and I have something that I've been wanting to show you for a long time. I have been hatching out some of the rarest rainbow fish in the world. I was able to get them as eggs at an auction that I went to for the James River Aquarium Society, and we had Gary Lange as a guest speaker. Anybody who knows anything about rainbow fish knows that Gary Lange is a very well-known, world-renowned rainbow fish expert. He did go through and tell us a lot of amazing stories about his travels and how he went to these locations in Indonesia and just very remote parts of the world where it took weeks to be able to get to these spots where he was able to collect these rainbow fish. And there was a species of rainbow fish that was an absolutely incredible story that he told about how they got to this very remote creek and collected these rainbow fish. They are currently unnamed. They're just Melanotania species Myesiu is what they're called right now. You really can't find any pictures of them on the internet. He had some pictures of the adults, but really there wasn't much information out there. So I went to this auction at the James River Aquarium Society and I bid on these eggs and I was able to hatch them out. And today is moving day and I'll be moving them to their 10-gallon tank just to let them grow out a little bit further before moving them into an even larger tank. But before I show you the moving process, I want to show you the eggs from the beginning to the end and how I got to where I am today. So let's go check that out. So I won't tell you where the bodies are buried, but I had to fight to get this tiny little vial of 70 eggs. It came with detailed instructions from Gary Lange with lots of different things that he recommended that you do to be able to hatch these eggs. I did my best to follow them. It also came with some golden pearl food that you could use after the eggs were born, and specific instructions on water hardness and temperature and other things that it took me a while to set up and get perfectly right. I had this 5-gallon tank ready before I went to the auction because I knew I was going to try to get these eggs. But I had a small container ready to receive the eggs that was floating in the larger tank that I could store the eggs in. The eggs came attached to a piece of yarn from a spawning mop, and I drained the container with the liquid that was in there, which had some methylene blue in it. And then I took this piece of yarn out and carefully tried to take the eggs off of the yarn with the most delicate touch that I could muster. I tried to get the strands of the yarn to not stick to the eggs and fall into the water also, but it took quite a while and quite a bit of work to be able to get it off of there. He recommended that you get rid of the methylene blue water and not use methylene blue, but rather use water with a little bit of hardness in it. He had a specific TDS that he said that we should shoot for. I have very soft water, so this was very difficult. I think this is one of the reasons why, spoiler alert, I wasn't as successful as I probably could have been. I tried to use salt to get the water to the right hardness, but I don't think it's as good as having it naturally hard. You'll see later in the video I also put some eggshells in there to try to maybe raise the carbonate hardness, calcium hardness in the water, but I'm not really sure if that was very successful. But I did have success, but I did not have 70 fry hatch. So after I got most of the eggs into the container, I spent a long time trying to pick out all the fibers and just make sure that there was nothing in there that could potentially contribute to the eggs fungusing any. And after I did that, I checked the container that they came from to make sure that I got all of them and to just make sure that I had nothing but clean eggs sitting in the bottom of this bath that I had prepared for them. I noticed very quickly that I was already starting to see little eyeballs form inside the eggs, and it actually only took about a day for my first wiggler to hatch. Once it hatched, I got it out of the container and put it into the larger bath and followed the instructions and immediately started feeding it golden pearls. Per Gary's instructions, the goal was to get them on brine shrimp as fast as possible to let them grow as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that, other than the ideal temperature and water parameters, was to feed them as much as I could. I didn't overfeed them. I just tried to do lots and lots of small feedings as much as I could. Basically, anytime I walked past the tank within 3 or 4 hours of each other, I put a little food in there for them to eat. And within a few days, I had quite a few fry swimming around in there. I'm not really sure exactly at first how many that I had. It was really, really hard to count them, especially when they were small. I'm sure I probably lost a few fry along the way, but there were quite a few at first, and it was super exciting. I also monitored this tray as they were hatching to make sure to remove any fungus eggs that I could see. After a few days, probably less than a week, it was quite clear that all of them that were going to hatch had hatched, and there was nothing left to wait for. And so I took this bath out of there, and I just began focusing on the tank at large and feeding it as much as possible until they got a little bit bigger and ready for brine shrimp. I also did water changes as much as I could and kept the bottom of this tank as immaculate as I could. I did water changes at first every other day as he recommended, and then as they got bigger, I just focused on testing the water to make sure it was clear of nitrates and doing water changes just to suck the debris off of the bottom of the tank and keep it as clean as possible. You'll notice that this tank is bare bottom. I had to add a few pieces of biomedia in there just to give it enough surface area for it to populate the correct amount of bacteria to be able to keep this tank nice and clean. This is just something that I've learned from experience when I've had bare bottom tanks in the past, that a little bit of biomedia just gives it a little bit more surface area in order to keep the tank cycled. But all of this was cycle media that I took from other tanks. You'll also notice that the heater is a little different. That our first heater that I put in just wasn't really holding the temperature quite as well, and so I switched to this Eheim heater, which was brand new out of the box, and I tested it and got the temperature perfect, but it seemed to be working just fine, and the temperature was staying very stable. I also was very careful with my water changes to put the temperature into the tank that was the exact temperature of the tank to make sure that I did not shock them at all, at least until they got bigger and possibly more resilient to these water changes. But even to this day, I'm still very picky and careful with the temperature of the water as I change it. Once they were big enough to eat food other than the golden pearls, I switched to the Aquarium Co-op Magic Nano Feed. I also put some powdered Repashy in there, as well as, of course, brine shrimp. And true to Gary's recommendations, once they got on these other larger foods, they did begin to grow pretty rapidly, to the point where they got out of the fry stage much quicker than I expected. So a little over 9 weeks after I got the eggs, they had gotten large enough that I wasn't even calling them fry anymore. They were pretty big, and I decided that it was time to move them into a 10-gallon tank just to give them a little bit more room to prevent any problems with possible aggression or anything like that. It wasn't very hard. My net was almost the exact same size as the tank, so one quick scoop and I got them all into the net. The only thing that I didn't do well enough was that the tank that I had put them in, although it was a cycled tank that I had just kind of cleaned out and prepared for them, I didn't have the water sit long enough in the tank so that it gassed off the high CO2 that I have in my well water. So unfortunately, when I first put them in there, they were gasping for air a little bit, and I took a bunch of water from the previous tank and dumped it in there in order to fix that. But within a few minutes, they were swimming back around again, and they were just fine and ready to go. But I'm still continuing to feed them a lot, as much as I possibly can, and looking forward to the day that they are adults. But based on the rate that they are growing, I think we're going to get there pretty darn quick. I'm definitely going to be making videos of them as they grow and updating you all on the process. And of course, when you have a fish that is this rare and this awesome, I am going to be breeding them and probably not putting them into a large display tank where they could potentially get hurt. I am going to definitely focus on breeding them once I have a couple of breeders and spreading them around in the hobby as much as I possibly can, so stay tuned for that. But thanks a lot for watching this one, and I will see you in the next one. Wishlist out.